Good day everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Australian businesses are feeling the full force of COVID-19 restrictions, with revenues declining sharply and many concerned about their survival. To understand the impact of COVID-19 on small and medium enterprises, we launched the COVID-19 SME Tracker in late March in partnership with TEG Insights. The tracker monitors how business decision makers are coping with the seismic effects of COVID-19 and adapting to the new business reality. In this webinar, James Organ and I discuss key insights and implications from the tracker. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. So this is the third webinar that we have done looking at and discussing some of the insights and trends coming out of our SME COVID-19 tracker. Again, as with previous webinars, with me today is James Organ, MD of ACA Research. Welcome, James.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone, for your attendance once again. Unfortunately, not sharing too much good news today, but hopefully we can work through it and find some positives somewhere.
Absolutely, and obviously we're trying to figure out what this all means, where we're heading, and what it means for the economy and Australian SMEs. So, last webinar was June the 19th. That's 7 weeks ago, and we were, I guess, we were in a fairly confident mood back then. I remember, we were talking about maybe going to New Zealand to do some field work because of this trans-Tasman travel bubble. We were seeing daily cases, single figures, and a sense that we're winning the battle. So what was our, in that kind of context, where were we then? How are we feeling, and did we kind of get it right?
Yeah, unfortunately, that was about as good as it got. So I think on June the 1st, lots of restrictions were being lifted, with lots more planned, and data was picking up, and our conclusions from that webinar were as follows. So, strong signs of recovery with both short and medium term revenue projections increasing. Well, that didn't happen.
Certainly didn't.
Declining concerns regarding business survival despite the stimulus cliff edging closer. No, that one's not true either. Many are returning to the workplace. They're willing to travel interstate. They were, but it was short-lived.
And some of that interstate travel's created some of the problems we're in now.
There you go. So, and we were confident that the government had our backs, but the need to reopen state borders to increase economic activity, well, again, that causes all kinds of problems to some degree. So that was wrong too.
Let's see what we did. Yeah, right.
Well, did we get this right? Well, hopefully most SMEs will survive. We'll see. That's something's difficult to predict, but we did need more financial support, and obviously the government has stepped up and extended JobKeeper and various other stimulus programs. So fundamentally, as good as we are at research, it does demonstrate this is a very dynamic, fluid time, and hopefully what we share with you today, which obviously will be more pessimistic, will also change as quickly as these numbers did from the last wave, which, as Steve said, was really only a few weeks ago.
I think a lot changes in a very short space of time here, and obviously we do endeavour to ensure that we get the report out from the tracker as quickly as possible after we complete field work, because even like kind of data that's 2 weeks old is old. But we're into the 14th wave now. Obviously today we're introducing some of our latest unpublished data to share with people in this webinar. We've done 4,200 survey completes over this period of time, so this is a big set of data that we're building up, and it's unique, and I believe it's being widely used even in government, James.
It is indeed. So yeah, so as with most things, the more regularly you do it, then the more traction you get. So this is wave 14, and again, there's lots of people using it, and by this stage we thought that we might not be publishing the research because the issue might have gone away. But as you can see by the right-hand side of that table, it's obviously never been worse, and this is data that was completed, that we collected finishing on Sunday, the 2nd of August. So Alicia, who does all the hard work, has put together a nice presentation very quickly, and again, trying to create something positive out of what at this moment in time is difficult to do.
Well, we're into the 14th wave. COVID's only into the 2nd wave, so we're ahead on that front.
Let's hope we're not talking about that in 3 years' time.
No, that's right, exactly. Okay, let's get into the meat of it. So really there are 3 sections to this conversation. What has been the impact of COVID-19 on businesses and their revenues? What's been the broader economic impact in terms of things like the impact on jobs and investment, and ultimately, what are the prospects of survival, and kind of what now, what next, where are we heading? So let's go into this first section, and obviously, as we alluded to at the outset, and if you've been receiving what are now the fortnightly reports, you'll be aware that we reached this kind of peak of confidence in early June, and the numbers since then have obviously deteriorated. The point about the 30% threshold, I always make this point in the webinar that this is the threshold for JobKeeper eligibility. So this is an important cut of the data. That 30% decline, James, is that, how do we see that panning out over August?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the facts are the facts again. We're up into the 70s again. Last week, the 19th of July, was actually worse. We thought it was going to get worse this week, but it's a little bit of comeback. So I mean, at the end of the day, 70% of businesses with a decline, and despite those numbers at the bottom where we're seeing the mean revenue drops, kind of plateau and it may be even fall a bit. This is still the very early days of obviously the hard lockdown in Victoria, so there's not a lot of prospects of those lifting in the next couple of waves for sure.
And the question is about what has been the impact on your business revenues since the onset of outbreak of
basically
COVID,
what impact has COVID had on your revenues? And obviously some people would have started seeing some nice recoveries in 7th of June period, and then the brakes have been slammed on because of what's gone on since then.
So let's look at that from a state perspective in terms of where we're at the moment, this current week, and clearly you might have been expecting Victoria to have the worst numbers. Maybe that's going to change, as you say, once lockdown really starts to bite down in Vic, and we're looking at lockdown extending for several weeks still there. So we'll be able to see that. But it's interesting that, do we have concerns here that where the impact has been actually worse in New South Wales currently than it has been in Victoria?
Yeah, and so this slide's obviously ordered in the sense of left to right, with the largest proportion of more than 30% on the left-hand side. So yes, I mean, this is just one bar from 14 waves for each of these states. But I mean, New South Wales has been poor from the start, and obviously it's very concerning because the New South Wales has the most businesses, and therefore the most businesses in jeopardy. Queensland, clearly without the tourism industry working, is under extreme pressure. But yes, those Victorian numbers, again, we would now expect those to start ticking up quite quickly over the next little while. But even when you go into somewhere into WA, which clearly is more isolated, then there's still 80% of people who are saying that they've lost revenue, even though 38% is 30% or more. So again, maybe somewhat surprising that at this moment in time, the state of the nation in New South Wales and Queensland is worse than Victoria.
And looking ahead, the question about whether, where's the revenue expected to be in 4 weeks' time. So, this is kind of starting to, feel a little bit like, Groundhog Day, in the sense that everybody's saying it's about, a lot are saying it's about the same, some deterioration, some little improvements. But those, green shoots that we were seeing in June, those top green bars, they're definitely, going down. And there is this sense of, even if it's about the same, but it's about the same from a pretty poor situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's the ones that are losing revenue, the ones that think the revenue is going to be worse or slightly worse over the next 4 weeks. Again, clearly no surprise, but we're now back into those net scores at the bottom there in the red numbers. Going back to, as Steve says, Groundhog Day of the 10th of May. So, that's 3 months of our lives gone. So, it's 3 months. 3 months of optimism is now, 3 months of pain. So again, not good.
I wonder if there are any kind of silver linings in here when we look at this by industry, or indeed, the fact that everybody is impacted by this. And again, if you look at those green bars by sector, it was, again, a few weeks ago, it was starting to look encouraging for hospitality. That's definitely gone down. Are there any positive signs in here for any of these industries? Production, maybe?
Well, yeah, I mean, some of the industry sectors, such as production and to a lesser degree construction, were not as impacted as much, and so therefore their revenues weren't likely to pick up in the same way as hospitality and retail and distribution. But yeah, again, there's no is the answer. You can see, if you're looking at the 2nd of August bar, and apologies for all this data that sometimes is necessary, but I mean, the fact is, if you look at the 2nd of August bar for hospitality, you look in the same place for construction, same place for retail. I mean, there's a lot of businesses that are predicting their revenues are going to be worse off in 4 weeks' time, and hospitality, no surprise. Retail, maybe no surprise, but again, if the world of construction falls over, and obviously all those restrictions in Victoria are going to exacerbate that. So again, it's very concerning. And
distribution's again deteriorating, where we were being more positive about distribution, but obviously state borders still being closed must have an impact there as well.
Correct. And I mean, as with the first lockdown, I mean, clearly production, distribution themselves were benefiting because people needed stuff made and grown and moved around, and therefore the distribution guys were moving stuff around. But yeah, again, if you can't move around the country effectively, then ultimately it makes it very difficult.
Yeah, all of which demonstrates that this is highly interconnected, that what happens in one sector has consequences for other sectors.
Absolutely.
So, in terms of, the response by federal and state government, let's look at satisfaction with the federal government's response. That doesn't look too bad. Clearly it's a net positive, and has maintained a level of, positive satisfaction. It's 61% are satisfied at the moment with the federal government response. So
yeah, so ScoMo and his team have clearly been reasonably consistent in terms of their messaging, and some of the bad stuff that comes out the state response gets flicked onto those guys. But yeah, but generally you would expect if there was an election tomorrow and business people were voting, then ScoMo would be a shoo-in. So yeah, so that it's there's still confidence in the government, and it's very important that confidence remains through this next period when we just don't know how long it's going to last for.
And obviously, in that field period, 5-7 weeks ago, we've had obviously changes to JobKeeper, for example. So, the federal government has been responding to and been fairly well communicated its intentions to the marketplace.
Yeah, and they've done it in a reasonably, given people a reasonable amount of notice, and clearly listened to a lot of the advice and made decisions whether they've made well, they obviously haven't made affirmative decisions in all cases, but they've made decisions, and as you say, Steve, they've communicated reasonably well and reasonably consistently.
Contrasting that with state government response, where there have been criticisms about that communication, either state-to-state communications or the speed with which decisions are being taken, borders being closed, kind of, decisions being taken kind of overnight, and in a sense maybe having to do that, but it's obviously leaving people, lack of preparedness, being caught on the foot, not knowing whether they are compliant or not, etc. So there's a high level of variance here. Obviously, when we look at that by state, obviously WA doing pretty well there, but that contrasts very significantly with Victoria. Obviously, Daniel Andrews is obviously having a tough time down there.
Yeah, so I mean the WA situation has obviously again there's been strong leadership there, and it's been consistent leadership, and I suppose the latest controversy would be Clive Palmer and banging on as he does, and he's been shut down, and so I think people like that. In Victoria, it's hard to be critical of any of these leaders that are doing the job that they're doing, because it's hard for anyone to get everything right, but clearly in the last little while, then the pressure's piling on Daniel Andrews, and he was never he's never been that popular throughout, so that obviously doesn't help. But again, when you're looking at that, you look at New South Wales, and this is only 2 weeks data. New South Wales, as we've seen, a lot of the businesses are struggling, and fundamentally, Gladys is certainly coming under more scrutiny now in terms of the way she's managing things, and obviously if there's any uplift in new cases in New South Wales, then the pressure on Gladys will harden up as well.
Absolutely. So we'll move now into the next section. But again, if anybody out there has got any particular questions that they want to ask us, just fire away as we go. We'll answer as we go. So feel free to shoot those through. Let's look at now the broader economic impact, and in particular, what impact this is going to have on employment and unemployment and business investment. So, we obviously asked the first question about what impact do you think this is going to have on various aspects, global, the Australian economy, and then down to business. Clearly, we're in this now for the long haul. The impacts here we're seeing are going to be more than, longer term, more than 12 months.
Yeah, so again, the data on the right-hand side of that slide demonstrates that in the latest wave, we've shifted up 11% and 9% in terms of the long-term impact on the global economy and the Australian economy. And long-term impact is more than 12 months. So as we sit here on August the 7th next year, then people are saying, well, we're still going to be having lots of problems. So that when people are thinking at a macro level, they tend to think that they're in a better shape to be able to respond than everybody put together, and that is demonstrated in those bottom two bars. So despite the economies of the world and the Australian economy struggling for at least 12 months, then that's not going to impact spending, investment, and the number of staff you employ for as long, in their opinion, at this moment in time. But again, you can see on the right-hand side that those numbers are ticking up, +4 in terms of capital investment and +7 in terms of the staff you employ. So again, if you want to take those numbers from week ending 19th of July, where you're at 25%, week ending the 5th of July at 16%, and you're now at 32% in terms of long-term impact. It doesn't take too many more weeks for that bar to be up above 50% for the number of staff you employ. And again, we all kind of know what the impact of that is if people are losing their jobs.
And even at 32% and 37% in terms of employment and capital investment, that's still a significant number of businesses, and the impact of that, how that trickles through into the economy in itself, is going to have an impact.
Huge, yeah. So I mean, obviously 66% people there are saying that it's going to have an impact on the number of staff. So 66%, 2/3 of businesses are not going to employ the number of people that they used to employ, and they're not going to spend money in the way that they used to in 84% of cases. So it's the huge numbers.
That's absolutely right. Kind of on the flip side of that, if you know you're in this for the long haul, and if you are trying to plan out and so on, we all know it's going to be kind of downhill and negative. But to some extent, does it make it easier to plan?
Well, I mean, it makes it easier to plan. Whether it makes it easier to do anything, it depends on your financial situation, your access to money, your appetite for risk, and all of those emotive issues associated with running a business. So yes, you can plan as much as you like, but if you plan and don't do anything, then you may be in a bigger hole. So again, someone smarter than me said that the most important thing to do during a crisis is be useful.
Yep.
So our way of being useful is providing free research about COVID so that we can share it with people like you in the hope that someone's going to give us more work as we continue. So that's us being useful, and that's us doing things. So ultimately, my advice is not to worry too much about planning, but do stuff.
Absolutely, and it's very time horizons now we're trying to think of are trying to get through the next 3 months, or even next month. For many businesses, it's really hard to figure out where you're going to be in the next 12 months. That level of uncertainty makes it very difficult.
Correct. There's this, the difference probably between this and all of the other crises that we've lived through is that the timeline for this is definitely unknown. Even with the GFC, I think there was more parameters around how long it was going to last and the impact at a very early stage, but not so for COVID.
So in terms of the unpacking this, these investment intentions, what's interesting here is that there is a bit of a silver lining for the IT industry. We're seeing an uplift there that what people are going to be spending on it is all about IT hardware and software. I mean, why IT, and what do you think people are going to be spending on?
Yeah, so again, it's not surprising. We've all seen the uplift in the share prices of all the big tech organisations throughout the world. So again, we've got to change the way we work. We have changed the way we work. We need to buy the right tools, right software, the right hardware for people to be able to work at home and ultimately to be running more secure businesses, more productive businesses, more collaborative businesses, etc. And so that's the way we do it. And obviously, if we're all stuck at home and we can't go out and see people, then we don't need to buy cars and utes and other vehicles. So again, those numbers, have been pretty consistent intentions to purchase, equipment and other vehicles. I mean, if you look at data in the normal times, there would be, there would be half of those people would be intending to purchase passenger vehicles in any one time. So it's a significant drop. But yeah, again, the IT space, again, no surprise. We all know this is happening. We all know who's making money out there at this moment in time, and that is going to continue. So again, back to Steve's question, what are you going to do? Are you going to plan? Yes, you can plan. You need to plan to optimize your business, and you need technology in a lot of cases to be able to do that. You need to digitize your business to be able to do business differently, work differently, etc. So we expect that to continue, and it's accelerating quite quickly.
I think it'd be, as we go on further waves of this, kind of trying to figuring out exactly where this IT spend is going. Is it going into these digital transformation programs? I mean, some of the vendors that I interview on the CX Spotlight podcast, talk in a very bullish sense that, and they're often dealing with enterprise, but they're talking in a very bullish sense that this is accelerating digital transformation, as you say, enabling businesses to really kind of do things very differently at scale. But equally, it might just be about spending more money on laptops.
Yeah, and I mean, Australia ran out of laptops at the early stages of this as well, so it definitely is. But I suppose, if you're looking at the macro trends of what's going on in IT and people moving their business to the cloud, you know, I mean, that's just accelerating.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think someone told me the other day Macquarie Bank was going to have everything in the cloud by 2022.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, that's a huge thing for an organisation like that, and the associated, as I said before, the associated issues surrounding security and those types of things mean that people have got to spend big bucks. But if you don't spend big bucks, and if you go back to the GFC 2008 when everything went pear-shaped, Commonwealth Bank spent $1 zillion on their IT infrastructure and came out very strongly, and are still reaping the rewards from that. So again, yeah, if you're going to do stuff, then you know you've got to do stuff that's going to give you a competitive advantage and increase your efficiency, increase your productivity, and reduce your costs. So there's the answer.
And improve customer experience.
And hopefully in that improve customer experience. But again, I mean, you know, customer experience ultimately is driven a lot through self-service and a lot through digitization, and so at the same time as customer experience going up, then costs should be going down. Again, not great news for employees, because with that efficiency, do we lose more and more people? Or as we've seen previously, we talk about IT, no, we've become more efficient, we've become a better business, and therefore we need to employ more people to sell stuff, install stuff, you know, and do stuff. So hopefully that's the case.
Could do another webinar completely all around that.
Oh yes.
And I'm sure we will be doing at some point as well. Let's look at jobs now. And so, you know, we've obviously been, you know, we're aware that the unemployment numbers are going up. You know, we're talking about, you know, hitting a kind of 13%. You know, that's not going to be a high watermark, is it? It's going to go higher than that. You know, we're obviously seeing in our, you know, what is our data say?
Well, I mean,
about,
again, if you talk about the two right-hand bars, I mean, we're seeing 41 and 40% over the last 2 weeks, as opposed to 34%, 32, 33, 33 in that May-June area. So there's more people laying off staff. So, you know, there's not necessarily more people laying off more staff, but there's more people laying off staff. And and if you're up to 40% of organisations laying off, you know, one person, it's a bunch of people. Yes, this week the actual proportions have actually continued to drop. So if you want to look at the glass half full type of story, you look at that bottom row and you go, right, it's gone from 50s to 40s and now it's in the 30s. Great, okay, so the actual mean change in the number of staff in those organisations that's dropping staff is dropping. So so there is some positivity there, but I wouldn't want to predict at this moment in time what that's going to look like in the next wave, because that could reverse very fast. So if they're saying 10%, if the government's saying 10% by Christmas, you know, these numbers are based on the proportion of businesses, not the proportion of staff. You know, it's pretty close. I would imagine that 10% is going to be the minimum, 13% could be, you know, the worst.
And the, you know, the number of applicants for certainly for, you know, for jobs that are being advertised and so on, you know, you see, you know, hundreds of applicants for a single role. So it's, you know, for anybody who's losing their job, it's a significant challenge to get back into the labour market as well. Yeah,
I mean, my wife is from the airline industry for 25 plus years, and so she hasn't got a job. So, you know, for her to get a job in airlines is not going to work. So what's she going to do? So she's you know, she's looking at retraining herself to try and get a job. But it's tough. I mean, you can get a job, I think, packing mangoes or picking mangoes, can't you, in the Northern Territory? No one wants to do that. But you know, if it's the white collar people ultimately in those white collar jobs where there's hundreds and hundreds of people applying for those jobs. So
that's right.
It's real tough.
Yeah. And you know, in terms of the, you know, kind of the state differences, you know, again, you know, we're seeing, you know, New South Wales having the biggest impact here at the moment, but I guess we're expecting some level of catch up from Vic over.
Yeah, but again, if you look at those national averages or what we were looking at before, and then now you go 18% in the mean change in staff across all SMEs, and then 14% in Victoria. I mean, those numbers are huge numbers when you're talking about, you know, 60% of the economy or whatever it might be. So yeah, there's not much more we can say there. That New South Wales has been in a similar state to Victoria, and both of them need to come out strong.
JobKeeper and job seeker are going to be so critical in all of this, and let's just look at the JobKeeper extension. So generally a very positive reaction there to JobKeeper. Why are some negative though? I mean, surely we should all be positive about JobKeeper.
Yeah, well, starting on the positive side of things, I mean, clearly, 67%, so 2/3 are positive, but only 20% are very positive. So it indicates that there's not enough money. We're dropping from 1,500 to 1,200 on the 27th of September. So there's, it's great that we've got it, but is it enough to keep us going? But those negative comments, I mean, they're fundamentally from people who don't believe in the policy. They don't believe that we should be getting the country into debt. They don't believe that businesses should be supported. They believe that it creates lazy business. So everyone's got their opinion, and don't get me wrong, some of those opinions are correct. Not for everyone, but they are correct. So it is a difficult balance in that. But moving on to the right-hand side of that slide, the fact of the matter is that if there's, I think there was 750,000 businesses on JobKeeper the last time I looked. If you look at what's going on the right-hand side of that slide, you can see that only 14% of those people currently accessing JobKeeper believe that they won't be eligible. So I saw numbers when this was refined a couple of weeks ago saying that they were expecting 30, 40, 50% of people, businesses to come off JobKeeper and it to accelerate. So it's not going to happen. So if we're spending 70 billion, I can't even remember what the number is now, but whatever we're spending, and they think that we're going to reduce that down to a lot smaller number, I just can't see it happening. So, and I think there was another refinement this morning to it. So if you qualify for the next quarter, I think then you qualify for the January-March quarter as well. So the great thing is there's going to be a lot of people being supported. The bad thing is there's going to be a lot of money going out for a long time.
Now, somebody's asked a question about the commercial real estate market and so on. So we will come on to that, because I'll answer. We'll look at that question when we got on to a slide that looks at people's future intentions with regard to real estate. So thanks for that question. We will answer that question. Going to look at this issue now of employee productivity, because if your job is on the line, there's a lot of uncertainty. People who it will still feel, employees will be feeling, some level of uncertainty about their employment prospects and so on. You kind of thought, well, maybe you'll be doing as much as you can then to be as productive as you can if you have got a job. And this is kind of quite interesting here, where we look at this productivity data, and you highlighted here, those businesses that are saying that the productivity of team members when working from home compared to the office is actually worse. I mean, there was some saying it's got better for sure, but this level of unproductivity, that's 30% of businesses saying for whom they have who employ staff are saying that this is less productive. Why is that? Why do you think productivity has declined? And kind of the question is, well, what can be done to improve that productivity? Yeah,
so I mean, again, it's difficult to answer all of that detail, but I think the common the common thread on this is that everyone's working from home, we're having a wonderful time, and people are a lot less stressed, and we're all it's productivity. Well, yeah, most of those surveys are done with the employees, and God bless, we're lucky because our employees are obviously very productive, but some people aren't as lucky. So we're talking to decision makers in these organizations, asking them, do you believe your employees are as productive? And they're saying no. Now, that's not necessarily the fault of the employee. There's obviously issues associated with technology, there's issues associated with doing the work and how the work is done, etc. But it's a problem, and if you look at those larger organizations, 5 to 19s, 20 to 99s, 100 to 500s, it's up to 38% in 5 to 19 employees, and there's a lot of those organisations. So, you know, the takeout is that, again, as these businesses get more and more pressure and numbers started to drop on JobKeeper, etc., maybe we're not generating as much work, so therefore people aren't as busy, so therefore there goes another person, there goes another person, there goes another person. So you know, if you are a business that has people working from home, you really need to implement effective processes and training to ensure that you're getting the best out of your people, and your people are able to get the best out of you. So I can guarantee you now that jobs will be lost if this lack of productivity continues.
And obviously, you know, technology can play a role. The technology that's being invested in can also play a role in helping to improve productivity.
Correct, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt, and you know, employees when they're in the office want the right tools and technology to do the job, and they certainly want it at home. But you know, is the dog, you know, getting, you know, 2 hours of attention a day? Is the fridge getting 2 hours of attention a day? Is the husband getting 2 hours of attention? The wife, you know, the children, the whatever. So again, how are people managing that? And I mean, this is all built on trust. We trust our employees to do the right thing. Now, if you want to go and say, well, I don't trust you, and I want you to write timesheets of exactly what you're doing for every 15 minutes, or, you know, that's not going to do you much good either, I wouldn't have thought. So it's a real fine balance to make sure that you are, you know, having ongoing communication and ultimately understanding what the expectations are. They don't need to work, people don't need to work from 9 to 5. Lots of our people work from 6:30 in the morning to 8:30, take the kids to school, come back, you know, vacuum the whatever, do this, do that, back to work, you know, etc. So again, there's a lot of learning to do. It's not as easy as everyone can work from home and they're productive, because it's not the case.
I had an interesting anecdote of a contact center scenario where agents working at home, agents were starting to call themselves and then put themselves on hold for an hour, so they can just sit back and twiddle their thumbs. But then obviously the technology plays a role, because then it identifies this kind of white space, white noise. Oh, nothing, there's no communication going on. So then you go, you're not. But equally, the technology is identifying the really productive people and trying to learn what the productive people do really well. So then you kind of like codify that and then turn that into, you know, training and personal development programs.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's, you know, again, this is a webinar for another day, because there's so many issues on that. And you know, a guy that we know well, Steve Hertzberg from NRG Solutions. I mean, he's looking at creating content, digital content, so that leaders can learn, you know, how to effectively manage this issue, and ultimately how employees can, you know, learn the tips and tricks of working better from home. So it's an evolving situation.
And yeah, there's clearly no doubt we're going to be, this home working arrangement is going to be around for quite a time. You know, again, a few weeks ago, people were, you know, back in, you know, June, the expectations were that, you know, staff are going to be getting back into the workplace. Might not be 5 days a week, but be back in the workplace. You know, pretty optimistic about that being the case by October. Probably a little bit over optimistic, do you think, now? And that's obviously gone down significantly since then.
Yeah, so I mean, we've gone from 87% down to 48%. So those state numbers are rolled numbers, so next week they'll drop significantly. But you know, you know, again, they've dropped significantly over the last month. So I just think that they're just going to continue to steadily drop down. And so so we've got this conundrum of, we've got this dropping, or not necessarily dropping productivity, we've got this challenge of productivity. Are we going to get a better result with people back at the office? Well, we can't get people back at the office because of the virus, because of people travelling on public transport, etc., etc. So it's again, it's a juggling act.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to look at a downsizing as well. Then this impact, and you know, I did want to kind of get onto this impact on the you know, on the commercial office market. So you know, looking at the folk who are who've got employees working from home, whether they expect them to reduce the size of their premises. So this is, we're seeing 23% saying that. A significant number still don't know. So if you kind of combine the yeses and the don't knows together, that's quite a significant number of businesses.
Yeah, it's a huge number of businesses, and the commercial real estate industry are certainly going to have to reinvent themselves and create a greater level of value if they expect businesses like ours to remain in commercial offices in North Sydney. So, yeah, the building across the road from us is still not completed. It's 38 stories high, a beautiful looking building looking over the harbour, and I'm sure horribly expensive to put people into. But will it ever be full? I don't know. So it's going to be a difficult situation for commercial real estate people. And when these current projects are complete, then where do we go from there? And will there be new projects to keep the architects, engineers, tradies, etc. in business? I don't know. But what's interesting about that slide is that middle bit. So those people that have had a better experience with their team members working from home are more likely to be looking at reducing their floor plates, in not just office space, but it could be retail, it could be it could be warehouse, whatever. So there's obviously certain people who can work from home, certain people who can't. So the fact is that the ones who are looking at reducing their costs of their real estate are the ones that have had a better experience or have done a better job with their people working from home. So it's clear that if you ultimately train your people to be productive at home, you're better at managing them when they're at home, and you're getting better outcomes when they're at home. They're happier when they're at home. The tenure might be longer because they're at home. All of those benefits also result in the fact that you could be chopping your commercial floor plate by 20, 30, 40, 50%, who knows? So there's a lot of costs associated with that, and that money can be used to buy better technology, pay people bonuses or whatever. So again, it just signifies there will be a huge change. And to Steve's point, if you've got 30% who are saying not sure, don't know, well, over time they will know, and a lot of those will probably go into the yeses.
A lot depends on the location of that real estate as well. So look at a location like Wollongong down south. You've got in New South Wales. You've got a much cheaper running cost there, and the cost of real estate is lower, and they've got a significant volume of Grade A real estate coming through over the next couple of years. And the kind of question, well, will there be demand for that kind of real estate? Will it be a lot cheaper? It's high quality real estate at a fraction of the price of Sydney real estate, and you've got an environment where people are more willing now to consider those locations rather than a CBD location. So it kind of depends on where it's located as well.
Exactly. I mean, how many offices are located in the CBD or in North Sydney because the staff want to work in the CBD, or they want to work in North Sydney, or because they've got to have meetings with clients.
Yeah.
Well, they don't. I mean, I've had a client on the Central Coast for the last 10 years, and usually I drive up there, have a meeting for 20 minutes and drive back, just because that's the way the clients always liked it. That's what I've done. This week, kick-off meeting took me 15 minutes, so I saved myself 5 hours.
Yeah.
So that's a classic example of where you just go, well, Zoom's going to work every day of the week. It works for everyone.
And it comes back to the point about productivity as well. If you've got that time back, it's what you do with that time.
Plus, you can do the work for less because you don't have to spend so much time travelling around the place.
All right, last section. We've got 15 minutes to run, and again, fire your questions through. Hopefully, we answered that question about commercial real estate and its future. So when will business return to these pre-COVID-19 levels? And so, right now we've still got a quarter, still don't know. Is that the biggest worry in this? So all of those bars are dropping, and the
bar on the right-hand side is by the end of 2021. So when do you believe your business revenue will return to pre-COVID-19 levels? So we've got a drop from 51 to 32 by October 2020, a drop from 59 to 34 by the end of 2020, and a drop from 82 to 74 by the end of 2021. So again, it's a long way away, and as Steve says, you've got 26% of people who don't know if it will be 2022, never, or just have no idea. So you know, there's been lots of numbers flicked around of who's going to survive, who's not going to survive, how many people is that going to be, if it was this many. You know, that indicates that, you know, you could quite easily see a quarter of businesses fold if we continue on this path.
And you know, rather than an economic recession, you know, potentially you are looking at more of a depression than a recession here if this continues for that long.
Yeah, well, let's not get too grim. You know.
No, you briefed me to be more positive on some of this. So that probably wasn't the right too.
And we're going to be fine, Steve. Don't worry. It's Friday.
But I think the point here is that uncertainty is a very, you know, creates a lot of the markets don't like uncertainty.
Correct.
And you know, when you look at this by sector, you know, I guess it really doesn't look great for hospitality. But equally, you know, there are other sectors where there's still a level of uncertainty as well. Maybe construction a little bit less so.
Yeah, but again, to the question that was asked, I mean, is that, you know, are they just kicking the financial problem down the road? I mean, you know, if you look at construction and you link it in with hospitality, for every building that's built, you need a cafe to go in there, you need other food and retail stuff going in, and you know, how do you attract a hospitality business into a large building that, you know, might not have anyone in it in 2 weeks' time because all of a sudden there's another outbreak of COVID. So, you know, people are just not going to risk those types of businesses. And again, if construction projects stop or slow down, then generally there's just going to be less opportunities for retail, less opportunities for services, less opportunities for hospitality. So yeah, so everything's interlinked, and you know, a financial problem over here is going to impact, you know, all those folk over there.
So the big question then, obviously, as we always return to, is, you know, will businesses survive? And you know, as we know, there's always a level of business formation. There's always a level of, you know, business cessation. But you know, often businesses stop, you know, not because they've failed, but you know, for various reasons. They've just kind of reached the end of their kind of life cycle or other reasons. Here we're really talking about businesses failing. You know, it's no longer trading, and obviously there are consequences around that we will need to think about in terms of the impact of any debt those businesses have, the impact on insolvency. So we'll come on to that in a second. But in terms of the, you know, this level of concern that exists in the marketplace, you know, this level about will my business survive? That's it's ticking up again.
Well, it's at the highest it's been. So I mean, that's it, 73%. I mean, you know, 1% higher than last time, but it's at the highest it's been. So again, you know, extrapolating these numbers across the market is a dangerous thing to do. Mm-hmm. But again, there's things that people don't consider. I mean, because, you know, yes, they're concerned about failure, but as Steve says, if you've been running a business for 20 years and you've been dealing with COVID for 8 months and there's no signs of it going away, if you've got a lease coming up, you've got all your people on JobKeeper, you kind of go, well, if I've been doing it for 20 years, so I'm 50 or something, don't you kind of go, well, this is just too hard? So you go, it's too hard. I'll just jack it in. I don't want the risk anymore. I don't want the stress. I'll go and pick mangoes. I don't know, but it's, you know, that's the thing with in a normal year, I think you get 13% fail and you get 15% come in of new businesses. Well, where are those 15% going to come from? Well, maybe there will be some technology and some of those types of businesses come in, but generally you're going to have less businesses coming in, and you're going to have your normal failures based on the financial issues times 2, plus the ones who just are tired. So again, not a pretty picture.
Not a pretty picture. And so the point I was making also then is, do we have, should we be concerned about some of the quality of the debt that's owed to banks here? Because again, we're talking about consequences, knock-on effects, and so on. So, obviously, there's a loan deferrals already being used in the marketplace, and these mechanisms are already being used. But how do you kind of read what's going to happen at the end of these loan deferral periods?
Yeah, I mean, it's horrible. I mean, again, you've got 25% of small businesses, taking up this opportunity to defer loans, and at the end of the period, then I need more time. I can't afford to pay, so I'm going to have to restructure. So we've got 26% of people who are going to start repaying. So I mean, again, the bank share prices this week have gone south, obviously because of Victoria going into lockdown. Those Victorian businesses are not going to start repaying their loans, let alone all the mess in New South Wales, according to these numbers, where people are struggling. So yeah, so where does the money come from? When does it come? And again, I don't have the answers, but it has a wide impact on larger organisations if they're not getting the money back, and if the banks start obviously struggling, if they ever struggle. But if the banks are under pressure, then the government's under pressure, then there's more money, and again you get into just a cycle of debt.
That said, we're not showing the slide here, but the report does show that the level of satisfaction with bank support has remained pretty constant throughout the period to date.
Yeah, I mean, again, the level of support for the banks is associated with them dealing with loan deferrals and that type of thing, and obviously because they're working in conjunction with the government, collaborating with the government pretty well, and they're all on the same page. Then as the pressure gets higher, and the more people go to the bank and say, please sir, can I do this? Please sir, can I do that? And the bank's going, yes you can. Then satisfaction goes up, and it's particularly in those larger organisations, larger SME organisations, where they are carrying debt and they've got working capital and they need it. They're the ones that have got stronger relationships with the bank because they've got more debt, and they're the ones that are being helped out at the moment, so they are more satisfied. So, but again, where does it stop?
If it all goes pear-shaped, we've got to talk about the I word. And this is a key consideration at the moment in terms of negotiations with government about changing the insolvency regulations, because this could impact, as you say, large numbers of businesses, and the consequences of insolvency in Australia are not very good for your ability to restart a business and so on. So so again, where do we? Is this something that government should be putting in place mechanisms to?
Yeah, so I mean, again, most people don't understand the implications of what happens in bankruptcy, and it's not a point of I've gone broke and I've lost all my money. It's a case of going in this particular, and in that case, you can't start another business for 5 years, whatever it might be. So is it fair that a person who goes broke after 6 months of COVID through really no fault of their own can't be allowed to start another business in 6 months' time or a year's time when things start up? Probably not. So I know that Bill Lang at the Small Business Australia is working hard on this, and if we don't allow some flexibility here, then ultimately you lose a lot of small businesses, you lose a lot of businesses generally. If you lose those businesses again, you don't have people employed, you don't have wages, you don't have money being pumped in the economy, and it continues to go pear-shaped. So something needs to give in this regard. According to me, according to most SMEs, we might be, because we are small businesses, it might be self-fulfilling to some degree, but the fact of the matter is that people need some kind of protection and therefore some level of confidence to be able to kick on in the next chapter of their business lives.
Good. A couple more slides to go just before we talk about the concerns about personal health and well-being. There was a kind of question coming back to the reduction of floor plates and so on. The question was, among those businesses who tend to reduce the size of their business, what do you know about the solutions they intend to use? Surely Zoom doesn't replace everything.
So in terms of what they intend to use,
out beyond just beyond Zoom video conferencing, if we are going to have these a longer term commitment to working in a home, but a work from anywhere, essentially, less office space, more flexible working arrangements, but equally the solutions, I think, for people to remain connected, to do business, to sell, all of that's happening in a more remote world. Are there any solutions? Is it all just about Zoom?
Pat, I don't know the exact answer to your question from this piece of research, but from my understanding of talking to people, I mean, the vast majority of people are looking at a hybrid solution, and as we're doing with surveying our staff, how many days a week would you like to work at home? How many days a week do you want to in the office? What are we going to do when we're in the office at home? So it's ultimately, again, just collaborating with the team to get an understanding of what their needs are, and certainly all of our team don't want to be sat at home 5 days a week. And so if we're looking at it at the moment because our lease is up in April next year. So what will we drop by 20, 30, 40%? Depends on what happens between then. But the simple answer is that I think people are just going to continue with a hybrid, adopt a hybrid solution as soon as they're confident that people can come back to the office for at least a couple of days a week.
And obviously we're looking here at the impact on one's personal health. That's obviously gone up as we're seeing these outbreaks of community transmission. Yeah.
So, and again, this question is not necessarily related directly to are you going to get COVID. It's related to how are you feeling mentally and in the day to day. And again, the longer this goes on, the more likely is there's going to be business owners and leaders that are going to fall over based on the mental stress as opposed to the COVID issue. So again, those last two bars are scary compared to the 5th of July. So again, the government's aware of this. The government's been pumping money more into mental health programs, etc. So that's what we need to do, as well as stamp out community transmission and anything directly related to the virus itself.
Okay. So key takeouts. Do you want to just walk us through?
Yeah, probably no one wants to hear them by depressed, and I don't know how many people on there are in Sydney, but it's raining cats and dogs, so it's depressing in Sydney, and obviously in Melbourne it's a bit tough, all locked away. So anyway, let's try and be happy, and maybe we can go to the pub after the webinar. So I shouldn't say that in front of Victorian people. So obviously, again, the second wave has had a devastating effect on SME confidence. We thought we were on the way up when we did the last webinar, and clearly that hasn't been the case. Again, it is what it is, and we have to deal with it. But we still are confident about the federal government, but we know more support will be required. We don't know how long, so therefore we don't know how much, and clearly that does concern a lot of small business people who are concerned about the amount of debt that we're going to acquire over the period of time, and that impacts our children and our children's children, and it's just not a good situation. The majority of SMEs will need JobKeeper, will continue to need JobKeeper, and again, that obviously impacts the amount of money the government's throwing out there. And we do need to consider further modifications to the loan deferral scheme, because clearly lots of those businesses who are using it are not going to be able to restart paying, and probably not going to be able to restructure those loans. So there's going to have to be ongoing conversations there. We've talked about insolvency regulations to protect businesses from bankruptcy, and I mean, again, this one is one where small business people need to be noisy and make things happen, and it'll only happen if someone keeps beating the drum. And like I say, Bill Lang at Small Business Australia's got a pretty big drum, but he needs other people to help there. And so again, as a small business owner, then I understand the issues associated with that. And as described before, I think it's important that these small business people are not punished for something that is ultimately not their direct responsibility, or it's not their fault. It becomes their responsibility. And then we've spoken about people working from home. We've spoken about changing workplace needs. This is all well and dandy, but the fact is that still working from home and the long-term impacts of that are still unknown, and some things are good and some things are bad. How do we educate ourselves? How do we learn? There's probably a need for more research around this topic, and again, it's an opportunity to improve. It's an opportunity to invest in technology. It's an opportunity to change your workplace and the way that your workplace is set up, and that might help in terms of attracting and retaining staff. So there's opportunities to evolve your business there. So in summary, again, I'm not going to say in any of these webinars that SMEs are going to die, because they're not going to. We'll remain positive, but again, we thought we were on the road back to recovery last time, but fundamentally at this moment in time, it's a long way from recovery, and ultimately, as we said before, if you're a small business person, then you need to work out ways to do things better, and in our case, be useful, so that you can ensure the longevity of your operations. So
I think if we're all being useful, that in itself will create some level of activity and positivity.
And activity creates activity.
Absolutely.
So
that's a positive note to finish on then.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, audience. I hope you enjoyed that. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks again, everyone, for attending today's webinar. You can visit our website if you want to know more about the SME COVID-19 Tracker. Keep reading the weekly report and the blog, and share this widely across your personal and professional networks. Keep safe.